Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to this spooky but fun game called Unloved. Don't worry, that spooky feeling goes away after a few games, then you're good to go. So Unloved is an FPS roguelite with co-op that came out back in 2016. I think there's a lot going for this game, even though I just started playing it in 2021, years after its release. I want to talk about how this game holds up years later, as well as my experience and explaining the basics. There's a lot of little mechanics and systems and things to explain, so let's get into it. So, just like any other roguelite, you're going from one randomly generated room to another, and your main goal is to escape the level. As you would expect, you have other objectives on the way, and obstacles trying to stop you from escaping. Unloved takes a lot of inspiration from Doom, so one of your objectives is to find the blood, moon, and sun crests, which are the same as the red, blue, and yellow keys from Doom. Unloved is actually inspired by a Doom mod with the same name. I don't know much about the mod, but Doom influencing a game always sounds good. You'll notice the influence from the enemies to the atmosphere and even some of the items if you can catch it. But where this game starts to differ from Doom is the gameplay and the levels. Starting with the gameplay, let's talk about the guns we get to play around with. Normally you would start with a pistol, but I have a trinket that lets me start with an SMG. I'll explain the trinkets later, but the pistol is a very solid weapon and actually packs a decent punch to it. Don't underestimate it, get comfortable with all the guns. The silenced machine gun is one of my favorite weapons and just seems like a reliable gun to use most of the time. I don't know why it's silenced, but I'm glad I got a trinket to let me spawn with it because it's a very good and fast weapon. Moving on to the super shotgun from Doom 2. Okay, it's not that good, but it's still pretty damn good. The shotgun works mostly as you would expect. You mostly one-shot weak to average enemies. On some difficulties, you can one or two shot the strongest enemies. It's still not my favorite, but it's nice to have, especially if you get it before getting these next weapons I'm about to show you. But now we're talking about what I would call the special or super weapons. First, we have the nail gun. It shoots a pretty slow projectile that hits really hard. Like, really, really hard. I recommend using this at close range and on the stronger enemies. This one might be my favorite. Now with the final weapon, you have this badass railgun. This is the closest thing to the BFG that you're gonna get. The railgun shoots a very powerful beam that should obliterate about anything it touches. But what makes this gun even better is how good its alternative firing mode is. Yeah, that's right. There's a secondary way of firing all these guns. The pistol shoots really fast. The SMG also shoots really fast. The shotgun can shoot one of two shells at a time, which is actually very useful. The nail gun gets the ability to shoot a grenade once you get enough kills with it, and you already saw how badass the railgun is. I thought I heard some people say that it's disappointing that this game's arsenal isn't as big as Doom's, but I think all the alternative firing modes kinda makes up for it. You'll also need to find these weapons in each individual match, along with finding the ammo for each gun. But there's one catch when you pick up ammo, or pick up anything for that matter, and that is when you pick up an item, you have a chance of spawning enemies. So you want to be sure of what you're picking up and don't get yourself killed. It could be easy to get yourself overwhelmed. You also have to wait a second while interacting with items, so it just feels like you should be picky with what items you pick up. It doesn't feel like it's totally random for an enemy to spawn when you pick up an item. If you pick up items without caring versus carefully, you'll notice a difference. You're able to find basic things like weapons, ammo, health, and armor. You can also find these weapon mods which randomly buffs one of the weapons you have. There's these ink bottles and photos, which is more of a collectible and cosmetic part of the game. And there's these keys you can find to unlock these totem cases that give you a really good upgrade, like doubling your health, or it can rarely screw you by spawning tougher enemies. Speaking of the enemies, I wish they had a little more inspiration from the Doom games. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, and I do mostly like the variety. It's just weird how most of them can throw a projectile at you. Like, even most of the melee enemies can throw this red projectile at you. Maybe it's their way of making higher difficulties more challenging, but I feel like it takes away from the identity of each enemy, you know? Like, each enemy in Doom has its purpose, and you can have a specific gun to kill every enemy. Although they can sometimes run really fast or straight up teleport to you in this game, and have a similar amount of health, so maybe assigning a certain weapon to a certain enemy doesn't matter as much in this game, but it can still help. But let's go back to how these levels work. So looking at the minimap, it gives you an idea of each randomly generated level as you progress through it. I think it's good to mark locked doors and check corners so you're less likely to get lost. So your first goal is to find the red key to open the red door. Then in the red rooms, you want to find the blue key to enter the blue rooms. But once you enter the blue rooms and find the yellow key, that's when things turn it up a notch. Because when you get to the yellow room, you have these 7 blood machines you have to fill up, and I think they each take like 7% of your health, so you have to make sure you're decently alive when you get to these yellow rooms. On top of that, once you fill up these blood machines, you have a horde of enemies to deal with, and you have to run back to spawn to escape the level. It's crazy, but it seems smart to kill a bunch of enemies before you fill up the last blood machine. This is like the final wave of each level, and that's basically how each game goes. But just like any other roguelite, the replayability and variety can be like a gift and a curse, at least for me. Like, the game starts to feel a little bit the same, but there's some things to keep it interesting. For one, there's the different locations and randomly generated levels. There's actually a decent amount of customization you could do before starting the game. There's basic stuff like the difficulty and location, but you could also choose to make the levels bigger with more rooms, which is definitely harder, but also gives a better reward. You can also play on a daily seed, which many roguelikes have, which is just playing on one set level for the day. Like, if you want to learn a layout and play it again and again, then that's the mode for you. But speaking of different kinds of modes, you have all these game modes and challenges to switch things up and keep it interesting. There's some that are genuinely hard, there's some that are just fun, like the ones using specific weapons, and there's some that are cool, like Hot Mode, which is basically a clunkier version of Super Hot, but there's lots of little ways to play the game differently, which I just appreciate. I played a lot of them mostly for achievements, and if any of you are achievement hunters like me, then oh boy, this game's got you covered. There's nearly 100 achievements giving me a good amount of motivation to keep playing. But a big part of the motivation and replayability comes from the gameplay loop of a roguelite. Like I said earlier, you get these trinkets and there's other factors outside of the gameplay. When you escape and beat a level, you get these trinkets, which are items you could keep outside of individual games that gives you specific upgrades like buffing a certain weapon. You also get Karma and Q, which are other ways of currency or leveling up. The leveling system in this game is actually very interesting. You don't just level up from killing things and getting XP, it's based off how strong your items and loot are. Like, if someone is level 10 and someone is level 100, it's only because of the loot they have. If that level 100 takes off all of his trinkets, then he's level 1. That might be a little bit off, but I think that's very interesting and unique of this game to do that. You use Karma to level up your trinkets. You also need Fragments, which is from breaking down items that you don't want. And Q is just cosmetic only, where you can earn some titles. Along with these ink bottles unlocking you different color outfits. Yeah, that's the only character customization you're gonna get. We're all just different versions of this guy. I hope you like looking at this guy, because that's all you'll see in multiplayer if you can even find a game. I'm sure, as you can guess, this game isn't the most alive many years after its release, although I can find a random person somewhat often. Like, when I played this game every day for about a month, I saw someone hosting a game like every other day. Unloved is definitely better as a co-op game than a multiplayer game, if you know what I mean. I mostly played this game solo, but if you have a friend to play with, then this game could be really fun. But if you rely on finding random people, don't expect it every time. Though I did have some really cool interactions with some people on this game. I needed help on some challenges in higher difficulties, and luckily found someone nice enough to help me. It can actually be really beneficial to beat a way higher difficulty that you shouldn't be on with a higher level player to get some really good trinkets. Kinda feels like cheating, but not really. More like exploiting. You'll also definitely need people to beat those harder difficulties. There's a big late game in Unloved, and I'm personally not trying to find out. Abyss difficulty is when things seemingly get real. Like if you think you could grind this game to its core, then man, good luck. I also got this game for like $2 on sale, and I definitely think it's worth that price. I had very little to no complaints with this game, especially with my mindset and expectations. They're never too high. I'd maybe say the graphics can be not as good at times, but the lighting and atmosphere mostly makes up for it to me. This game can also get repetitive, and I wanna ask for more motivation or reasons to play the game, but with all the achievements and game modes, I know I'm just being picky. Also, this game having co-op is a huge dynamic. Like, only one person can pick up an item, so if you're full on armor, you can mark the armor so another player gets it. You're also interacting with items a lot, so it could be nice having a teammate cover you. Overall, Unloved is very cheap nowadays and shouldn't be too difficult to run. If this game looks fun even as a single player game, then check it out. If you and a friend want to play this game, then definitely check it out. Anyway, this is one of those reviews where I tried to say as much as I can remember because there's a lot of things to explain within the game, and the fact that there's multiplayer adds a completely different dynamic to the game, especially nowadays. But I hope I did a decent job covering Unloved years later and that you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you want to support me playing these indie games. Drop a comment telling me what you thought about this game or the video. This game was actually made by the people who made Dimension Drifter, so check out my review on that if you're interested. Don't forget to subscribe if you've been enjoying the content, and I appreciate you so much for watching the entire video, so I hope that means I'll see you in another one. Peace.